Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Korman Productions here to do another rewatch video of Quantum Leap, Season 3, Episode 5, The Boogeyman. The episode's description reads as follows. Everything goes wrong when Sam leaps into a gothic horror novelist on Halloween. The episode was directed by Joe Napolitano, whose last work on the series was the Season 3 premiere, The Leap Home Part 1. The episode was written by Donald P. Belzerio and Christopher Puntel. Chris's last work was on the episode One Strobe Over the Line, which was the very last episode. According to owlsplace.com, Cameron Burney and Robert L. Ziliax received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Art Direction for a series in 1991. The episode takes place on October 31st, 1964, Halloween specifically. The episode originally aired on October 26, 1990. Before going any further, I will tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a spoiler-free video, so if you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you check it out and then watch my video. Secondly, if you like this video and want to support the channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. This episode has an interesting reputation among the fans. Fans either love it, or they think it's the worst entry in the entire series. For me, it's a pretty enjoyable episode, nowhere close to the worst. That honor rests pretty comfortably with A Portrait for Troyan. After finishing the second season, I'm pretty comfortable calling that one the worst of the entire series. This is the series' second attempt at horror, the first being the episode I just mentioned, which suffered from some pretty bad acting from both the guest cast and the regular cast. That episode was more gothic horror, where this one is more supernatural horror, with better performances, though I'm not sure how I feel about Stockwell in this one. His performance is definitely off throughout most of the episode, but given that he's not really playing Al for the most part, that is actually a feature and not a bug. I can't decide whether his performance in the last act is brilliantly hammy or absolutely terrible. We'll get to that. Fans have a thing about saying the episode's name out loud. owlsplace.com claims some weird issues when trying to make the field guide for this episode, saying that the computer crashed 3 times while trying to write it. When writing about this episode, they did not include the full title. In my notes for this episode and in the thumbnail for this video, I also did not write out the name. Not because I'm superstitious, but because I have enough problems in my life without tempting fate. Though I did, and will refer to the episode's name out loud. owlsplace.com delved into why fellow Quantum Leap fans refuse to speak the name out loud. They say, the episode first aired near Halloween 1990, and from the first time it aired, weird events have been associated with this episode. As an example, this episode seems to have the highest incidence of VCR, cable, and local station failure than any other episode aired. There have been numerous reports of VCRs cutting out during the taping of this episode, local station and cable companies dropping their signal. Even mentioning it by name can be hazardous, as one net leaper can attest. He lost his job and net access. Its mention has been known to cause power failures and auto breakdowns. It is best referred to as the Halloween episode. Leapers everywhere will know what to speak when you mention that name. By the way, cameras and recording equipment also tend to act strangely around Christopher Puntel, the writer of this episode. Since it aired, his nickname has been Rupin Boogie. He is kind enough not to say the title of the episode around the fans, though director Joe Napolitano does. Mention of this merely causes Chris to laugh evilly. It should be noted that this entry on this site was written before DVDs were a thing. I haven't heard of any effects of streaming this episode or playing it on a DVD player or Blu-ray player. Watch this episode at your own risk. And now I can add my own story. Despite my efforts to not mention the episode by name in my notes or in the thumbnail for this episode, I experienced some issues anyway. Since beginning work on this video, my boss had some kind of mysterious foot injury, which I actually now know the name of. I'm not going to pronounce it because, I'm not even going to try. Anyway, This injury put her out of work for a week. And this is the start of the story, by the way. And then I started experiencing heartburn and acid reflux, which I did nothing about. I had never actually experienced those issues that much, to the point where my chest started to feel really tight at work. And being the hypochondriac that I am, I mistook this for the symptoms of a heart attack. After finishing my shift, and you have to admire the fact that I finished my shift despite the fact that I thought I was going to die, I went to the ER to make sure that I wasn't. I went in thinking I was on death's door, and left with a prescription for Tums. Go figure. I've always been a bit of a hypochondriac, but one day I'm going to think something is nothing, and then I'm going to drop dead. Not before completing my work on the series, of course. Anyway, I've wandered off point here, but I blame these strange occurrences on starting my work talking about this episode. That was the original reason for my delay. Oh, but it keeps going. When my boss got back, I was a couple of days away from my camping trip with my daughter, so I just decided, okay, I'm on vacation, screw it. When I got back, my boss, once again, went out for medical reasons, though she did decide to return in limited fashion, resulting in a 50-something hour work week for me. And then I got sick, resulting in me sounding terrible and not being able to do voiceover work. Once again, I blame my work on this episode as the cause for all of this. Alright, so moving on. AlicePlace.com goes on to say that Stephen King granted the production permission to use his name. He is in fact a character within the episode. This is the episode's Kiss with History, and there are several Stephen King references throughout the episode, which includes Carrie with the flying knives, Christine with the red Plymouth, which Sam drove, and the car gaining a mind of its own, Cujo, the Saint Bernard that was in the car with Stevie when he drove away. Also interesting to note that Dean Stockwell starred in the adaptation of one of King's books, The Langoliers. Not a great film for the record, though it is worth a watch for both Stockwell and The Cheese Factor. AlicePlace.com also points out two more interesting notes. An Emmy Award for the show is seen on the shelf in Joshua's office, Joshua being the name of the person Sam leaped into. And finally, this is the debut of the more colorful hand wink that will be seen for the rest of the series, and is what the fans most think of when they picture the hand link within the series. The hand link has reached its final form. Sam leaps in and finds himself holding a candlestick over a book titled Witchcraft in America from 1879. He says the year like he thinks he's somehow leaped into 1879, despite that being outside his own lifetime and against the theory of quantum leap. Why his brain would automatically believe that to be the year, just from reading the book, is kind of beyond me. He looks around the creepy room, calling to see if anyone is around. He walks up the stairs, sees a snake, hears a moaning sound from a closet, opens it up, and an evil creature leaps out at him, causing Sam to fall down the stairs and to be knocked unconscious. Oh boy! And credits. When we come back, Mary comes to Sam's aid. Mary is played by Valerie Mahaffey, who I most remember as being Joe's stalker on Wings. She had 3 appearances on that series, the last of which was in Season 7, Episode 18, titled One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, on February 27th, 1996, 2 days after my 15th birthday. In addition to that, she made an appearance on The West Wing, 9 episodes of Desperate Housewives with Terry Hatcher, another Quantum Leap alum, 14 episodes of the recent series Young Sheldon, the movie Seabiscuit, the Tom Hanks movie Sully, and one of Adam Sandler's lesser works, actually a pretty terrible movie, Jack and Jill. All told, she has 87 acting appearances and a producing credit for the movie Summer 11, for which she also appeared in. The evil creature is just a young guy in a mask, Stevie King, to be specific, though we won't find that out until the end of the episode. He's played by David Kriegel, who appeared in 2 episodes of Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, movies Speed, Alive, and the Nicolas Cage flick Leaving Las Vegas. He has 36 acting credits and a directorial stint of a TV show called VIP Passport, which curiously, Internet Movie Database has no actual information on, other than it aired on November 1st, 2006. After nearly killing his boss, Stevie decides to leave before the Halloween event starts. Mary, for the record, is Joshua Ray's fiancée, the one Sam has replaced. On the way out the door, Sam takes a look at himself in the mirror and sees a Chris Rapunzel cameo. That's the episode's writer making a cameo as Joshua, Sam's mirror image in this one. Stevie, on the way out, promises to one day write the scariest book ever written, except probably no one will ever read it. Somehow, I don't think that'll be an issue. Sam is busy daydreaming and narrating to us when he's interrupted by Mary telling him, "You don't know how to kill him, do you?" Wait, what? We're talking about killing Stevie? He seems a little annoying, but a good kid nonetheless. I'm not sure why we want to kill him. Sam is startled and says he doesn't want to kill anyone. But he has to, you see. That's the only way his book can end. Oh, we're talking about Josh's book. Phew, getting nervous there for a moment that the episode was going to be about the plot to kill Stephen King. Come to think of it, I would watch the heck out of that. After some conversation, Sam ends up upstairs, where he reads part of Joshua's book, before noticing Tully, who is outside doing some work on a ladder. Someone should tell Tully that working on a ladder during Halloween is bad luck. Oh wait, never mind, he just plummeted to his death. But not before randomly saying that those who dance with the devil are bound to get scorched. A random goat decides to murder him. Sam goes to his aid and is soon joined by Mary, but as I already said, he is very, very dead. He should have died several times over the way he was moving about on that ladder, and seriously, no one was there to hold that ladder? Seems like he wanted to die. Seriously, watch this scene again and tell me he wasn't asking for it. For the record, it's 9 minutes and 57 seconds into this episode before Tully died. Noting that now, because it will be important later. Tully is played by Donald Hutton, who appeared in at least 2 Kevin Costner movies, The Bodyguard and Dances with Wolves, which is a movie that enjoys an iffy reputation these days. He has 43 acting credits, the last of which was on the series premiere of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Emissary, as one of the Bajoran monks. I actually remembered that, though I had no idea that it was him at the time. We cut to Sam and Mary talking to the sheriff, played by Paul Link, who is making his second and last appearance on this series. He last appeared in the episode Play It Again Seymour, where he turned out to be the surprise villain of the episode, whereas in this one it is strongly implied that he could very well be the one behind the episode's events. And spoiler alert, it turns out not to be the case. The sheriff isn't too impressed with Sam's "the goat killed him" excuse. It does sound a little fishy, or a little goaty. Okay, that was a terrible joke. I'm sorry for inflicting that upon you. I really, really am. Not enough to cut the joke out, of course. I'm not going to do anything about it, but I still am nonetheless sorry. I must say, I really do enjoy Paul Link in this episode. More so than in his first appearance. Speaking of the devil, we have Dean Stockwell's first appearance in this episode at the 10 minute and 39 second mark. Note, I didn't say Al's first appearance because this isn't really Al. The sheriff can hear him, or at least sense him, which is meant to suggest that maybe there's some dark magic at work within the sheriff. But given the fact that's not the case, and Al is actually the devil, what's going on here? This blaming the goat conversation goes on for quite some time. The sheriff and Mary leave the scene, so Sam can berate Al for not telling him that Tully was the one he was there to save. Al says he is not to blame. Ziggy and him knew nothing about it. Like I said before, Dean Stockwell's performance is off in this episode, but I'm pretty sure it was done on purpose. Al, as he's reading through this history, or making up, not sure which, says that Mary is found dead at midnight, strangled in the church spook house. Given the person giving the information, not sure if that was what actually happened in the original timeline or not. We cut to what I presume is the staircase leading to the attic. Why are we here? Don't know. Good as place as any, as I suppose. Sam asks not Al if Joshua was a suspect. Not Al claims Ziggy says probably not. Interesting to note, the hand link doesn't light up at all, or make any sounds whatsoever. Sam takes exception to this, saying if he's there, he isn't going to kill an innocent person. Therefore, he would accomplish his mission and leap. Okay, But if you leaped into a murderer, the second you leap out, you will probably go back to the whole murdering thing. So you've effectively accomplished nothing, Sam. Al suggests maybe Mary wasn't innocent. So you were implying she strangled herself, or that she was strangled in self-defense? I understand not Al not making any sense, but I don't quite buy Sam buying into that logic without comment. Sam says he doesn't understand why Ziggy didn't pick up on Tully's death. Hey, Sam, I don't know if you've been watching the same series that I have or not, but Ziggy, and by extension Al, misses these type of things on the regular. Plus, Al got there kinda late. We don't call Al Admiral Useless for nothing. Sam says someone made a mistake, and a man is dead. You are correct, Sam. Tully is the man who made that mistake, showing incorrect ladder safety. And a man, Tully, is dead. Hell, Tully could be the reason why we now have pictures of a man falling off a ladder as a warning on all ladders. His death was not in vain. Warning, kids, you can fall off ladders and die. Not Al randomly points at a snake, a black mamba. That's a hell of a random subject change. Sam tells not Al that he wants him to run a check on Ziggy because he doesn't want to miss anything else. He's caught talking to his imaginary friend by Mary, who then proceeds to walk by Al and sense his presence, also likely to suggest her as a possible culprit, as she ends up a suspect within the episode. The phone rings. The sheriff offers to get the phone. Sure, sheriff. Answer a phone in someone else's house. That's perfectly normal. In Joshua's office, not Al and Sam are standing over the typewriter when a black cat leaps onto the desk. But of course, Sam reads what's written, and wouldn't you know it, it's about Tully's death. It doesn't read, Tully was an idiot who deserved to die. I may get off that at some point during the course of this video, but I don't think so. Al thinks someone has a very sick sense of humor. Only one it could be is Mary, who's calling for him right now. Dorothy is apparently on the phone, who wants to bring over some candles. Didn't tell her about Tully's death. Thought that was more of an in-person conversation. Not Al assures Sam he's gonna get Ziggy right on figuring out what's going on here. If I were Sam, I would be asking, why haven't you already been doing that? But alas, he doesn't. Al suggests he keep an eye on Mary, and Sam points out he's there to help her. Not Al says all he's saying is that letter didn't type itself. Sam and Mary talk to Dorothy about Tully's sacrifice for mankind and his contribution to the Darwinian Awards. Sam is still trying to look for a suspect. He thinks winning Mary's heart might have led to Josh making some enemies. I'm assuming he's thinking that these enemies planted a goat underneath Tully's ladder, a murderous goat, who would then intentionally, with now some forethought, murder him. If they ever make a movie like that, I would totally watch. This episode is giving me plenty of ideas. Sam doesn't really say any of that, but otherwise I'm really not sure where Sam is going with any of that. Not Al appears to tell Sam that he is definitely there to save Mary. Sam suggests they cancel tonight, but Mary doesn't want to. Tully was an accident, and the show must go on. They hear a loud scream. They run to find Dorothy dead on the floor. Sam's really upset and slams his hand on the cabinet. A black mamba appears. A murderous black mamba. I wonder if the black mamba is in league with the goat. Maybe you should have been paying more attention to Al's casual musing about a black mamba earlier. I mean, what the heck are they casually tolerating a snake's presence for anyway? And actually, I rewatched this. It's kind of hard to tell, but the black mamba is actually in a cage. Sam turns to Al, angry. Angrier than we ever actually see Sam. He tells him that he wants to know what's going on right now. Tear Ziggy apart if he has to, but he wants to know who put the black mamba snake in the kitchen, and he slams the broom down. Mary and Sam return from what I presume is the sheriff's office. Mary can't believe that there are 2 deaths now in one day. I'm sure this didn't exactly endear you to the sheriff. Back in the house, we see Al again, and he's once again pointing the finger at Mary. Flip-flop much? Sam asks how she could be behind it. Did she teach a goat how to pull a rag out from a ladder? I mean, maybe she did. Who knows? Not Al suggests that there wasn't a goat. Maybe she was down below and pushed the ladder, and Sam didn't see it. That explanation doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Sam asks about Sheriff Masters. Al mutters his name and doesn't answer Sam's question. He says he ran every test he could think of, and Ziggy checks out perfectly. Okay, cool, but Sam didn't ask about Ziggy right now. He asked about the sheriff. Not Al says there is something hinky going on around here. Sam says there is a logical explanation for everything. Al says there is one, but Sam won't admit it. Okay, Not Al. You have told Sam that he is there to save Mary. Can the devil be a little bit consistent here, please? Sheesh. Sam discovers a typewriter message about Dorothy's death. First off, whoever wrote that message is a terrible writer. Second of all, Dorothy overhears this conversation with Not Al. The good part, where Sam questions whether Mary is a demented psychopath. Mary is understandably pissed. As her anger builds, a skull in the room starts to shake, and then flies across the room. More bad acting from Stockwell as he reacts. His line delivery of, "I don't like things that fly around the room without wings," is pretty dreadful. Get the devil some acting classes, please. Mary, meanwhile, ends up having a seizure. We cut to the hospital, where Al says Ziggy never said anything about Mary being an epileptic. Sam says that Ziggy hasn't said a lot of things. Glad you're noticing, Sam. Sam says that it would explain the skull flying across the room. Sam says that psychotelekinesis is a very real thing, and gives a technical explanation that I don't understand, but I'll take his word for it. Sam and Not Al are still arguing whether Mary was behind the murders, and Al suggests that Sam go and check out Mary's home at 966 Salem Avenue. Dun dun dun. Creepy music plays as Sam opens Mary's door. Sam is hesitant to go in, telling Al women and holograms first. Al goes in without walking through anything. The house number falls, making the address 666. Cute touch. As they investigate, who should enter the scene but Sheriff Masters? Sheriff, I kinda missed you a little bit. Sam makes an excuse, saying Mary asked him to pick up some of her things. The sheriff finds that fascinating, as he just came back from the hospital, and he was told that she had yet to regain consciousness. Maybe the goat did it. The sheriff suggests Sam is going to need a good lawyer. Sam fires back that even cops need lawyers. You're going to need a lawyer. No, you're going to need a lawyer. I know you are, but what am I? Cut to the hospital, late at night. Ominous music plays. We see a man slowly walking. He turns on a light, and it's Sam Beckett with flowers. Terrifying. Mary is awake, telling Sam she thinks he owes him an apology. For what exactly? Sam asks her how she's feeling, and she responds, nothing a honeymoon in the Bahamas wouldn't cure. Hint, 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 Sam. She asks her if she knows of anyone in town who would want to hurt her, as in kill her, she asks. She can't think of anyone. Mary thinks Sam seems more decisive, more competent than usual. But the last thing Sam feels is competent. Sam suggests she should get some sleep. She asks him to promise that he'll visit, cross his heart, and hope to limbo. In the Bahamas, of course. I'd critique Sam's joke here, but that's about on par with my sense of humor. So glass houses and all. That was the calmest, nicest, lightest scene in the entire episode. Cut to Sam driving at night, speculating via narration that a killer was coming. Perhaps a killer with a badge. Lights come on behind him. Oh boy, is that generally not a good sign. The car is tailing him awfully close from behind. Well, that's just rude. A cat decides to do a jump scare on Sam from the back seat. Meanwhile, the driver, which has been tailgating Sam, rather rudely, I might add once again, abruptly pulls off, just before Sam hits a goat. Oh, that old chestnut. And then Sam almost hits Stevie, who's trying to flag him down. Stevie is freaking out, and Sam tells him it's not his fault. It's the murderous goat's fault. And the cat Sam goes on to tell him about the person tailing him, the goat that he swerved to avoid, the cat jumping up from nowhere. Sam tried to stay on the road, but suddenly the car had a mind of its own, like in Stephen King's Christine. Stevie says he didn't see a goat, which sets Sam off. There was a goat, the same goat with the murderous intent that killed Tully. Sam, you don't sound like a nutcase at all here. Stevie goes on to point out that he doesn't have any cats. Sam tries to point to the cat in the car, only there isn't one. Cut to Sam looking about in his house. He looks at a book with scary imagery in it. When Al appears behind him quoting Tully's line, "Those who dance with the devil are bound to get scorched." He scares the crap out of Sam, who you might have noticed has been a little bit on edge recently. Gee, what's his problem? Sam tries to get information out of him, but Al, per usual, has Zippo. At least the devil isn't any better at Al's job, or we might be talking about a possible replacement for him. Sam believes the sheriff killed those two people. Al suggests that maybe it was the boogeyman. Is that a confession there, Al? Sam tries to call the sheriff, but he's not at the office. He calls the hospital, but Mary has checked out and is waiting for a ride from the sheriff. Uh-oh. Al tells Ziggy to center him in on Mary. He disappears, but without the usual sound effect. Sam is driving at night when suddenly he notices the sheriff's car off the side of the road. He calls the sheriff, but the sheriff is very dead. Sam lets off a dramatic "No!" and he looks up and sees a goat. Aha! The murderous psychopathic goat. Someone please make that movie. And if it exists, please point me in the direction to watch it. Sam goes home. At home, the sheriff's truck is magically there. Sam narrates that Halloween was always one of his favorite holidays, but today, there were no tricks, no treats, only death. Did I write Sam's dialogue this week? Pretty melodramatic there, Sam. Sam asks Stevie if the sheriff was inside, and this moment here confuses the heck out of me. He just saw the sheriff dead. There's usually only one sheriff and some deputies. So, one, why isn't Sam a tad more surprised that the sheriff's truck is there? And after he rudely dismisses Stevie, because let's face it, Sam hasn't had the best day here, and he's a little irritable, he goes inside to find Mary to tell her that the sheriff is dead. But he just saw the sheriff's truck outside and asks Stevie if the sheriff was inside. And then he is shocked when the sheriff pops out from the kitchen still very much alive. Actually, I just went back and rewatched this entire sequence to see if there was something I missed. And I very much did not. In fact, upon rewatching it, it's even worse. Sam leaves his house in the middle of the night to go and get Mary from the hospital because he thinks the sheriff is after her and going to kill her. He happens upon the sheriff, he's dead. And in reaction to this, for some reason he doesn't continue to the hospital to get Mary. He goes home, where Mary already is, except that Sam has no way of knowing that. As far as he's concerned, Mary should still be at the hospital waiting for the sheriff. What we needed here was another sequence where Sam gets to the hospital to pick up Mary, only to discover that Mary has been picked up by the sheriff that he just saw dead. And after that, he cannot show surprise at seeing the sheriff at the house because he already knows somehow he isn't dead. Or at the very least, he should know that something even weirder is going on here. And maybe he already suspects all this, but we don't see any of it. Anyone care to make sense of this for me? The sheriff comes out of the kitchen where scary, suspenseful music plays and says, "Well, it's about time." Sam slowly walks towards him and then lunges for him, grabbing his wrist, when suddenly the sheriff turns into Al. Sam is examining Al's arm, surprised that he could be touching him, and Al says, "Bah!" Sam suggests that they run, which they both do towards the door, but Al prevents them from leaving, locking the door shut. This is where this wacky episode goes completely batshit. Al now has the glow around his eyes that is cheesy as hell. And Dean Stockwell's delivery sounds suddenly like he's impersonating a menacing Clint Eastwood. I'll never make up my mind about this performance, but it's no doubt that Stockwell is having a blast with this. Sam turns to his friend, or who he thinks his friend, who's seemingly gone evil, and asks, "Advanced psychotelekinesis?" Al will neither confirm nor deny that. Mary was never in danger, Sam says. "She is now." Al says. Sam asks about Tully and the others that had died. Al replies that the fun part was that it was a pattern that seemed to add up, but it didn't. Oh, but it did. Sam says. Al quoted Tully's line about dancing with the devil that Sam never told him about. He never walked through anything or came through the imaging chamber door. But most importantly, he was the only other person around when Tully and Dorothy died. Okay, he might be right about Dorothy, but he's wrong about Tully. Al wasn't there when Tully fell. In fact, Sam was. So, I'm not sure what you were talking about there, Sam. But Al's favorite part was Sam's face when he read the typewriter. He lets out another small, evil laugh. Al asks, "You know how the story is going to end." And Sam says he knows how he wants it to end. Which is when actual, real, honest-to-God Al comes to the imaging chamber door, apologizing for being late. I mean, you're really late. This isn't like 10 minutes late. This is like hours, maybe days late here, Al. But Al was having some technical difficulties. Was there a goat at the project? And that would be Al's first appearance in the episode at the 39-minute mark. I'm pretty sure this will never be beaten within the series. Anyway, Al catches sight of his doppelganger and is understandably a little freaked out. Al lets out the understatement of the century when he tells Sam that this is not good. Al suggests leaving. He would if he could, Al, but the devil has locked him in. He's already killed a couple of people, and he intends to kill the two of them. Al consults Ziggy, and Al helpfully tells Sam that there is definitely something there. The devil turns to Al and says, "That's more than I can say for you." Mary finally speaks. "Who are you?" The devil replies, "The yin and the yang, good and evil, God." And Sam finishes the sentence for him, "and the devil." Sam begs Al to tell him that he isn't real. Al doesn't help much on that front. Sam asks the devil why is he doing this. The devil tells him to put an end to his meddling throughout time. Who gave him the right to put right what he put wrong? Sam tells him that he's just trying to get home. Stockwell proceeds to give the most whacked out delivery I've ever seen in anything, making me think that his throat must have really hurt after doing this scene. And oh, by the way, Mr. Stockwell, if you would like a throat lozenger, I have one. I'm just getting over being sick, so I have a few left. He tells Sam that he is not going to make it. He grabs Sam's throat, and they start spinning around the room, which is super cheesy. The piano plays, the clock sounds, and Al yells for Sam. Sam tries to choke the devil, who morphs into all the characters he's been in the episode, before Sam falls, finding himself falling down the stairs into the beginning of this episode. The climax was pure insanity, pure cheese, pure over the top. Objectively, I wouldn't say it's actually good, but man was it fun to watch. Mary and Stevie are once again at the stairs, coming to Sam's aid, and this time, Al is also there. He tells Sam that they completely lost him for a minute. Sam puts his hand through Al to verify that he is in fact Al and not the devil. Sam tells Al that there were two of him, and one of them was trying to kill him. Mary thinks he's talking about her, naturally, but he's not. Stevie finds the idea neat. Al suggests he must have been dreaming. No thanks, that's not my preferred interpretation for what happened in this episode. Al proceeds to start giving him information, and then suddenly Sam books up the stairs just in time to save Tully, who totally doesn't deserve saving, but whatever. In fact, I think he might have just prevented the saving of many people's lives, as now there will not be the picture of a falling man on that ladder to tell people that you can fall off ladders and die. Al is shocked that Sam knew what to do before he even told him. And oh, by the way, this doesn't line up with the original timeline of this episode at all. I refer you to the events as I described them at the beginning. There was way more time before Tully fell off that ladder to his doom than what we are now being suggested in this episode. And if you're giving me that it was just a prophetic dream about what could happen, well, I say boo to you, sir. Or ma'am. I hate it was all dream episodes. I prefer to believe that the events in this episode really happened, and then the timeline reset. I can't figure out why the devil let Sam go, but the devil works in mysterious ways. Sam tries to blame the murderous evil goat one more time for Tully's fall, but there is no goat to be seen. Cut to once again saying goodbye to Stevie, after having explained the entire episode to all of them. Stevie is revealed to be Stephen King, and Sam realizes he gave him a lot of the ideas for his future books. And Sam weeps. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the episode. Well, that was certainly bonkers. Once again, objectively, I can't say that this was a good episode, but it sure was an enjoyably insane watch. I would probably say that this is actually a guilty pleasure. I'll probably debate whether this was a terrible or genius for the rest of the time, particularly when talking about Stockwell's performance in this. Next time we meet, we will be discussing Miss Deep South, one of the 4 episodes of the season that I never particularly cared for, and haven't watched in forever. So perhaps this one will improve upon rewatch. After that, we will be getting the debut of the new revival series. Whether I put the old series on hold while focusing on the new kinda depends on the new series itself, whether it gives me substantial things to talk about, and whether the new series is any good or not. We aren't long from getting our answers on that. At any rate, that's all I got for you for this video. If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Korman Productions. You can join my Korman Productions Facebook page. You can buy something from the Korman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Korman Productions, signing off.